We've done some great modeling, but everything looks very dark and gray in our scene. Go back and check out the previous two absolute beginner tutorials if you want to catch up. Otherwise, let's make our scene look a lot better by adding some materials and environment lighting. There are several ways to make materials. You can make complex procedural materials using node-based scripting, but that's definitely not a beginner topic. We'll make a very simple material that we won't actually use, just here in the viewport so you can learn some things. But then I'll have you visit a great texture website and download a few free PBR materials along with the HDRI sky that we will use. But first, let's just select our lantern. And since we made the lantern with the default cube, it already has a white material applied to it. But in order to see the materials, we need to either be in rendered view or in the material preview mode. Let's use the preview mode as we don't actually have much light in our scene. Hit the Z key and select it, or go up to the buttons in the top right and select the second from the right. And suddenly everything goes white, but also a lot brighter. Material preview mode has a built-in HDRI illuminating the scene. If that's a new term, it just stands for high dynamic range image, and it typically refers to a spherically projected image that wraps around your scene like being inside a dome. And don't worry if that doesn't make sense yet. For now, just know that the material preview mode will give you a nice neutral lighting setup so you can see what you're doing. With the lantern selected, go over to the properties window and click on the red beach ball looking icon. Remember, red icons deal with materials. Under the surface tab, you'll see a long list of settings, and most of these are actually pretty straightforward if you look at them one at a time. But let's just use the default material and poke around a bit. First, click on the white swatch at the top that says base color. And that gives you a color picker that lets you pick a paint color by dragging on the color wheel. I'm just going to pick a dark blue. You can pick your favorite color. Let's skip down to metallic. Most things are either metal or not. You can say dielectric if you want the fancy word. By default, metallic is set to 0. Click and drag all the way to the left and notice that it's clamped at 1. A lot of things in Blender and in digital art in general are on a 1 to 0 scale, with 0 being no effect and 1 being 100%. If we set it to 0.5, it would be the same thing as 50%, but leave it at 1. And notice that the lantern now has a kind of powder coat metallic look. So skip down to roughness and slide that all the way over to 1, making it 100% rough. And now the lantern has a strange, almost kind of velvety look as the reflections are totally diffused. But slide it back to 0 and suddenly it's extremely reflective. The trees that you see reflected in the surface are from that HDRI. It's hard to tell if something is reflective if there's nothing in your scene to reflect. So that's another reason to do this in the material preview mode. But very few things, except maybe Christmas ornaments, are this mirror smooth. So drag the roughness back a bit to something like 0.01 or 0.2, and we'll get something that looks more like a painted metal. And you can plug in a texture map into these channels as well as add grunts and scratches and small dents and whatever for more realism, but that's a more advanced topic. Basic PBR materials, that stands for physically based render, use these three and one more down below called a normal map. That channel requires an actual texture, so we'll check that one out in a bit. But with those four channels, you can make a wide range of surfaces. All the other ones here are for special circumstances, like things that glow or are transparent or have special surface properties. But 90% of the materials you will make just need a color, metal, roughness, and normal map. Scroll back up to the top and click on this field where it says material 0.01 or whatever and rename it to something that makes sense to you. I'll call mine shiny blue. Now select one of your rocks and notice that there is no material applied. We could hit the new button here and create a new material like we did a moment ago, but we can also click on the little white beach ball icon to the left of this new button. That gives us a list of all the materials in our scene. There are a lot of ways to apply materials in Blender, but if we select the new material, in my case shiny blue, with the rock selected, we will apply that material to the rock. If you want to remove a material, click the little minus button to the right. That's removing it from the rock, not deleting the material. As you can see, it's still on the lantern. Two important things to know about materials and other assets. Blender will discard any material that's not applied to an object when you quit. To stop that from happening, select the material and click the little shield button. The shield is protecting it from auto-delete, I guess, and then it assigns it as a fake user. Don't ask, just know that that saves your material if it's not applied to anything. The other thing to be aware of is that Blender doesn't auto-pack materials, and there's a lot of good reasons for that, but it means that if you copy your Blender file and open it up on a different computer, any materials that it's referencing as image textures back on your original computer will disappear and be replaced with a magenta color. So if you open up a file and there's a lot of weird pink things, it means that you moved the images or the file and Blender can't find them. Our shiny blue texture will be fine, as it isn't referencing any outside images. And the way to avoid this is to go to the File menu External Data, and select Pack Assets. And notice that you can also set the document to automatically pack assets. That will copy the images to your Blender file so they don't get lost, but be aware that that means your Blender file will get very big, especially if you're using a lot of high-resolution images. Okay, before we can make our actual image-based materials, we need to set up a few things. First, go to Edit and Preferences, and click on the button that says Add-ons. Blender ships with a lot of optional features. The fewer you have on, the faster Blender opens, so don't just go and turn everything on. But I want you to turn on 2 add-ons that are so incredibly useful, I don't understand why they're not on by default. In the little search window, type the word Node. Tick the box next to Node Wrangler. This will let us set up a complex material with a couple of quick clicks. While we're here, search for Image and check Import, Export Images as Planes. We will need that in the next video to add the woman to the scene. Blender is set up automatically to save these changes, so all you need to do is close this window. It'll even keep these settings when you open up a new file. Now let's go get some materials. There are dozens of great websites where you can download ready-to-go materials. One of the best and easiest to use for Blender is Polyhaven. Just search for it and go to the site. I'll show you all the steps here now, and then you can pause the video. It's just nuts how amazingly good these assets are, and they're all free. First, search for textures. Feel free to poke around and download whatever you want, but if you want to follow along with the ones that I'm using, search for White Plaster Rough 02, and then just click on the icon. Up in the right corner, find the purple download bar. Rob, the creator of the site and this material, is a Blender user himself, so notice the default download setup is for Blender, but you can download in other formats to use in other software. For this tutorial, just download the 1K materials. Remember, every step up isn't doubling the size of the files, it's quadrupling it. So the 1K is a little less than 5 megabytes, but the 8K is 127 megabytes, and that's just for one set of textures. Most monitors can't even fully display 8K materials, so stick with 1 and 2K until you really need the higher resolution. Click the download button. Next, search for Sand and download Coast Sand 2. Click on the Polyhaven logo in the top left, and while we're here, let's grab the HDRI. Click on Browse HDRI, and you can see they have over 500 different looks. Often you don't actually need to show the background image like we're going to do. You're just using the lighting information from the image. So look at the 4 spheres at the bottom of each thumbnail to get an idea. I'm going to have us use one of my favorites, Umhlanga Sunrise. Just search for Sunrise, and it should be near the top. If you have a fast computer and room on your hard drive, it might be worth downloading the 4K image, as we only need the 1, and you will see better results in your scene. But 1 or 2K will work fine. Extract the downloaded files and put them someplace where you can find them on your computer. And when you have the files ready, let's move to a different workspace by clicking on the Shading tab up at the top of the screen. Below the viewport, you'll see a workspace where you can create more advanced materials than just moving sliders around. Select the sand dunes in your viewport. There's probably no material here, but if you were exploring on your own and you added one, then just click the little minus button to remove it. And then we can click on the New button like we did before, and notice that it's also repeated down in the shader editor. Just to get into good habits, click on the name field and rename it Sand. For this next step, it's essential that you turned on the Node Wrangler, or nothing's going to happen. Move your cursor down to the lower window and make sure that there is a highlight around the large node. That's the principled material node that has the same fields as we saw in the Properties panel. Now with your cursor down in the lower window, hit the N key. That opens up a side panel, just like it does up in the main viewport, but this one has a tab for Node Wrangler. Now you don't have to open up this to do this next step. I'm just showing it to you now so you don't have to memorize the shortcuts right away. And also because my screen recording software uses one of the same hotkeys I'm going to show you, so I have to click the button here. Make sure that the principled node is selected and click on the button that says Texture Setup, or simply Control-T. And that's added a texture coordinate, a mapping node, and an empty image texture node, all wired up to the base color. And notice that our dune has gone black because there is no image loaded into the texture. So click on the Open button on the image texture node and navigate to the folder you downloaded from Polyhaven that has the sand material. Open the Textures folder and find the image labeled Sand01 Diff. That diff is short for diffuse, which is one of the names given to color information in a material. Select it and click Open Image. After a moment, the image will appear on your mesh. It looks okay. It's pretty big as it's one image stretched over the whole beach and it's just flat color information. We can do better if we add the extra maps. Now, it's a good idea to learn what's actually going on down here in the shader editor. The more you understand, the more you can make changes the way you want. But for speed, I'm just going to show you a magic trick that Node Wrangler lets us do. Be aware that you move around in the shader editor the same way that you do in the main viewport: middle mouse, scroll wheel, zoom, etc. Click and drag a selection marquee around the 3 nodes Node Wrangler added for us and delete them. Hit backspace or delete. Select the green principled shader again, and this time hit Control-Shift-T, or click the button that I have to do at the moment. It's probably going to open up the same image texture folder, but this time instead of selecting just the one image, select them all and click Principled Texture Setup. As all basic PBR textures are using the same kind of maps, Node Wrangler can detect the names of the image files and automatically wire them up for you in one click. Pretty cool. But put your cursor in the shader editor window now and type Control Spacebar. Now that's a nice trick to maximize the window where your cursor is. And let's look at what we have here. We have the same texture, coordinate, and mapping nodes. More of that in a moment. But notice that the Wrangler has split it up and plugged in the data into all 4 of the maps for us. That way, if we change the scale, rotation, or position of the images, all of the images will be adjusted at the same time. That's very handy. Up at the top, it's identified diff as the base color and plugged it in. Next, roughness into roughness, and that normal map we haven't talked about, and it's added the required normal map node for us. And down below it hooked up to the displacement map. We're not going to talk about that in these videos, but that's another cool feature that you can learn about in the future. Hit Control Spacebar again to get back into the full workspace. Move your cursor into the viewport and hit the 0 key on your number pad, or click the camera icon to look through the camera. You don't have to look through the camera, but it makes sense to make adjustments from the view you're going to render from. In the editor, zoom into the mapping node. Right now, there is no tiling in the scene, so our 6-foot square chunk of sand photo is being stretched across the whole beach, and it looks pretty huge. Notice the location, rotation, and scale fields in the mapping node. If you change the X and Y numbers in the location fields, you slide the image around on the surface. This can be really useful to hide seams or to make things line up. Rotating will spin the image around, but let's look at the scale. Another pro tip, if you want to change all the fields at the same time, just click and drag your cursor down the fields to select them all, and then whatever you type will be copied to all the fields. We scaled the plane when we turn it into the beach 20 times, so let's try that. Type 20 and enter. You make numbers bigger to tile the texture and make the image smaller. Use decimals to make them look bigger. That looks better, but the tiling repeat is pretty obvious, so let's compromise and try 10. Click on the X field in the scale selection and drag down over all 3, and then type in 10 and enter. And that makes the sand look a bit pebbly, but the tiling is nicely hidden, and that will do for our beach. Now select the lantern. Over in the Properties menu, click on the little minus sign at the right to remove our material. Now click on the New button and name it Stone. Find the Principal BSDF node in the editor window and select it like before. Control-Shift-T to make a setup, and this time select the images in the Other Material folder. UV unwrapping is a big topic, and I don't want to get you confused now, but let's just make sure that the lantern is nicely unwrapped. First, let's go ahead and apply the bevel modifier we added in the modeling video. That way, all the extra faces will be unwrapped. With the lantern selected, click on the blue wrench and either put your cursor over the bevel modifier and hit Control-A, or click on this drop-down arrow and select Apply. In the viewport, hit the Tab key to go into edit mode. Hit the A key to select all the faces of the lantern. It should all turn orange. Just click on a blank spot or double tap A to deselect all. But with all the faces selected, hit the U key, and in the pop-up, select Smart UV Project, and then OK. And Blender is going to do a quick and dirty unwrap of the surface for you. I'll just quickly click on the UV Editor tab so you can see what this just did. Just watch, you don't need to do this bit. I'm just going to select the white plaster rough from this drop-down so you can see the texture image. And then I'm going to click on this tiny button with 2 arrows to turn on the UV sync. So whatever I select in the viewport will be selected on the UV layout. And when I click on one of the triangles that makes up the roof, you can see that the corresponding triangle has been selected over in the UV layout. Careful where your cursor is. If I hit the G key over here and move, I'm going to start yanking that face around. Let me undo that. But if I move the cursor over to the UV layout and hit the G key now, I can slide this face around the image. And look what's going on over in the 3D view. I can reposition it somewhere else on the image. Blender doesn't mind if UVs overlap, but things like game engines and external renderers might. All the transform tools that you already know work in this window too. G to grab, R to rotate, S to scale. I'll undo and put it back. I'm not going to worry about it now, but notice that there is a face here, that these two faces on the post are in very different places on the image. So there's a seam right here on the corner. If I manually unwrap this mesh or spend some time moving things around in the editor, I could fix that. For now, just be aware that this is the thing, and you'll learn to do this better as your skills improve. I'm going to click back on the shading tab. Now, if you remember, I had the lantern look like it was glowing inside. You can apply more than one texture to an object. Let me show you how. Select the lantern, tab to get into edit mode, and hit the 3 key to make sure you're in face select. Shift select the 4 faces of the lantern window. Click on the material tab of the properties window. Notice that the little plus button up at the top there? Click on that to add another material slot to the object. With the faces selected, click the assign button to assign that new material to those faces. And then when the faces turn white, you know you did it right. You can then assign a pre-existing material from the drop-down window, or you can click the new button and make a new one. Go ahead and click new and name the new material glow. We don't need those faces selected anymore, so hit the tab button and go into object mode so the orange highlight doesn't get in our way. Scroll down in the shader list and find the black swatch next to emission near the bottom. First drag the value slider at the right all the way up to 100% so you can see your colors. Then in the color wheel, pick a nice amber yellow or any color you want. That's not all that exciting. Well, for a moment, switch over to the render view. The furthest sphere on the right, or hold the Z key and select rendered. Okay, now it's just a yellow square, so what? Well, just below the emissive color swatch, find emission strength and set that to 50. We're using the Eevee render engine, so emissive materials don't actually give off light, but we can fake the effect with one click. Go up to the Render Properties tab near the top of the Properties window. It's the icon that looks like the back of a camera. See at the top, our engine is set to Eevee, which is real-time rendering, which makes it very fast, but not so accurate when it comes to light and reflections. Find the little tick box that says Screen Space Reflections and check it. Okay, now some of the lantern light looks like it's being lit, so check ambient occlusion near the top to deepen the shadows of the cracks and crevices. We're not going to see much now, but it will look great when we add more light. And just below that, tick bloom. And pow! Our lantern almost looks too bright. Let's leave it for now and see what it looks like after we add the skylight. If you have a decent computer, go ahead and switch to the Cycles render engine so that you can see that the emissive material doesn't need to fake the light like Eevee. Glowing material is actually casting light into the scene. Let's add this HDRI sky I keep talking about. Hit the 0 key on the number pad or the camera icon to look through the camera. Let's stay in the rendered view as that's the only mode where we'll be able to see it. In the top left corner of the shader editor, look for the little drop-down menu that says Object. We will need to be in this mode to add materials and edit materials on objects like our sand dune and our lantern. But click on it and switch it to World View. And this is where we adjust environmental effects. Notice that there's a little background node here already. Select that and Control-T to use Node Wrangler. There's that magenta I was talking about, letting you know that it's missing an image. So click on the Open button on the environment texture and select Unlangala Sunrise. Instantly, we have added that image to our scene, except we're probably looking at some condos or something instead of the ocean. So how can we fix that? Remember the mapping node that we used to adjust the scale of the sand? Click on the Z field of the rotation and drag until you see the sunset between our dunes. What do you know? The world does revolve around us. Take a moment to switch back to the object mode in the editor so you don't forget. Well, we're done with the shading tab. Go ahead and click on the layout tab again. If your sky disappears, it's just because you need to switch to the rendered view in this workspace. Select one of your rocks and assign the stone material to it by selecting it from the list in the material tab of the properties window. Now select one of the rocks without a material and then hold down Shift as you select all the others, selecting the rock with the stone material last. Then Control L and select Link Materials from the pop-up list. All the other rocks will copy the material of the last selected object. And we could probably do with a few more rocks, but instead of duplicating more, let's use a different method that's a bit easier on our computers. Select one of the rocks, and instead of Shift-D to duplicate, hit Alt-D to make an instance of the rock. That means it's kind of a clone of the first rock, but any changes you make to the clones will be copied, and they will render faster. But this is also extremely useful for things like balusters or streetlights or windows or anything where you have a lot of copies of the same thing, and then you might decide to make your streetlights a bit taller. If you've duplicated them, then you'll have to make that change to all of them. But if you've used Alt-D to make an instance duplicate, then changing one mesh will change all of them. You can move, rotate, and even scale your cloned rocks individually. You just can't change the mesh or the material. So go ahead and spend some time spreading rocks around your scene in an interesting way. After a few minutes of duplicating, scaling, rotating your 4 original rocks, it should look pretty good, scattered across your beach. All we have left to do is bring in our woman. If you're in my class, you'll have access to the image I'm using. Otherwise, all you need is a PNG image on a transparent background. If you have access to an image editor, you can take any photo and place it on a layer and erase the parts that you want to be transparent, and then save it as a PNG or other file format that can have an alpha channel. You can use JPEGs for images that are rectangular and don't have any transparency. But to add something like a person, an animal, or a plant, it will need to be on a transparent background. If you want to follow along, you can go to Pixabay and search for People Transparent Background. It's not a great selection, but they are free and you don't have to sign up for anything. Hopefully, you watched the previous videos and have already turned on Import Images as Planes. If not, edit, Preferences, Add-ons, and search for Import Images as Planes, and check the box. You don't even need to restart. Make sure that you are in Object Mode and Shift-A to add. But instead of adding a mesh, this time you'll want to go down about halfway and select Image, and the pop out, and then pick Images as Planes, and then navigate to the file for Woman Back, or whatever image you are using. She might be hidden below the sand, so if you can't see her, try G and Z and move her up. And there are ways to make planes face the camera automatically, but we're going to skip that for now and just use RZ to rotate her only on the Z axis. So rotate her around until the highlight around her is fairly square, and then use S to scale and the move gizmo to position her in a nice spot in the image. I'm putting her down the hill a bit so it looks like she's closer to the water, and then I hide the bottom of her dress. If you zoom in to her, you might notice that she looks a bit pale and slightly transparent. With the plane selected, go to the Materials tab and scroll all the way down and open the Settings menu. And you'll see drop-downs for Blend Mode and Shadow Mode. Set these both to Alpha Hashed. That should make her look solid. If there's any strong light on the image, it will cast shadows of her shape, not of the plane. And of course, she's still just 2D, so you're not going to get realistic shadows from side light. The light in our scene is so soft this next step doesn't really matter, but image planes often look better if you crank up the roughness and pull down the specular channels. That way the surface of the plane doesn't look shiny and the person doesn't look like they're printed on a poster. Just so you know you can do it, I'm jumping into edit mode and adding a couple of loop cuts to the image and then pushing the edges forward a bit, then shading smooth to make the image look a bit of a half cylinder, so when we animate the camera in the last video, she won't look so flat from other angles. Totally optional, but know that you can slice up and edit images as planes like any other piece of geometry. Images as planes with alpha channels are great for people, animals, foliage, background trees, or horizons, anything that would be big and complex to model and that you just want in the background. We're basically done, but before we render this out, let's tweak the light a little bit. Select the red globe in the Properties window. Under Surface, you should see our HDRI. Set the strength to 0.25 to add some contrast to the scene. Then select the original light and move it so that it's roughly between the woman and the lantern. Make sure that the lantern is in front of the light so it gets a bit of a silhouette from the sunset. If you want to move your sun around, you can jump back into the shader editor, or even better, just open and expand the window below the color channel. And then again, under the vector mapping, you can get access to that Z rotation, just like you did in the shader editor. I'm moving the sun a little closer to the woman so some of the bloom halos her a touch. Now click on the Output Properties tab, the one that looks like a printer. Here you can adjust the resolution, file type, and path. The defaults are probably fine, so just hit F12 or go to Render and select Render Image. In Eevee, it should just take a few seconds, but your image isn't saved yet. Hit Alt-S or go up to the Image menu at the top of the render window and select Save. Now you have an image that you can email to your mom and dad, make your desktop background, open it up in Photoshop and post-process, whatever you want. Whew, that was a lot, but I've got one more short video that will show you how to animate the camera in the scene and make a short video like the one that you saw at the beginning of the series. And this is just scratch the surface of what Blender can do, but even with what you've learned so far, you can go ahead and make a scene of your